Welcome to my new sewing tutorial. Today, I'll show you how to make a baby doll dress. Start by applying fusible stay tape to stabilize the neckline edges. I do this on the wrong side of all 4 pieces. Notice that I apply the tape from the notch all the way up to the top edge. The section below the notch will be stitched together to form the V neckline, so I leave the stay tape off this area to avoid creating unnecessary bulk. Now we'll sew the neckline pieces together to create the V neckline. Stitch down to the notch, remembering to backstitch at the beginning and end of the seam. Try to finish the stitching exactly at the notch on both pieces. Later, we'll place these pieces on top of each other, so the seams need to line up perfectly. Now make a small clip at the point where the seam ends, being careful not to cut through the stitching. Leave about 1 millimeter before the seam. Then open the seam allowances and press them flat. Now place the 2 matching neckline pieces right sides together and stitch along the edges to form the V neckline. At the bottom of the V, your stitching should meet the seam you made in the previous step. This part requires a little precision. Try to insert the needle exactly at the point where the lower neckline seam ends. If you don't get it right on the first try, you can always go back and correct it, just like I did. The goal is to make sure there is no small hole at the point of the V once the neckline is turned right side out, and that the whole point is neatly and securely closed. Next, turn the entire neckline right side out and understitch about 1 millimeter from the seam. This will help keep the neckline facing in place and give the neckline a clean, professional finish. In this step, we'll join the front bodice to the back at the shoulder seams. Because the front bodice is made from 2 layers, I like to enclose the shoulder seam between them. This gives a very clean finish with no visible raw edges and means there's no need to use an overlocker or serger here. If this method feels too difficult, you can also finish the shoulder seam in the traditional way by sewing all 3 layers together and then finishing the raw edge with an overlocker or serger. If you'd like to use my method, start by sewing the back piece to 1 layer of the front bodice with a 0.5 centimeter seam allowance, which is about 3/16 of an inch. Then turn the pieces and sew the second front layer in place, enclosing the first seam inside the bodice. For this second seam, use the full 1 centimeter seam allowance. Repeat the same process on the other shoulder seam, and the bodice is ready for the next step. In this step, we'll make the ruffle for the neckline. Start by folding the short ends of the ruffle right sides together and stitching them closed. Repeat this on the other end. Turn the ends right side out so the seams are hidden inside the ruffle. Then fold the entire strip in half lengthwise and press it carefully. Next, sew 2 rows of gathering stitches along the raw edge, approximately 0.5 centimeters and 0.7 centimeters from the edge, which is about 3/16 inch and 1/4 inch. Gently pull the gathering threads until the ruffle matches the length of your neckline. Use a measuring tape to measure around the neckline first, as the required length will vary depending on the size you are making. Now we'll attach the sleeves. Make sure you position each sleeve correctly before sewing. The pattern pieces are marked to show which side of the sleeve attaches to the back bodice and which side attaches to the front. You'll also have notches to help you line everything up accurately. Along the sleeve cap, there are 3 notches. 2 notches mark the section that needs to be gathered, and the middle notch marks the center of the sleeve cap. When attaching the sleeve to the bodice, sew up to the first gathering notch. Backstitch to secure the seam, then skip over the section that will be gathered and continue sewing from the 3rd notch. Match this notch with the corresponding notch on the bodice and sew all the way to the end. The extra fabric left between those 2 notches will now be gathered to fit the armhole. Because all the notches are transferred from the pattern onto your fabric pieces, you can clearly see where the gathering should begin and end. I'm also showing this on the illustration to make it easier to follow. Be careful not to attach the sleeve the wrong way around. As you can see, the back side of the sleeve is slightly longer than the front side, so always check the markings before sewing. Finish all the raw edges with an overlocker or serger. Once that's done, we can move on to attaching the cuffs. Fold the cuff with the right sides together and stitch the short edges to form a loop. Then press the seam allowances open. Next, fold the cuff in half lengthwise with the wrong sides together and press it carefully. Measure the finished circumference of your cuff, then gather the bottom edge of the sleeve to match this measurement. Make sure the gathers are distributed evenly all the way around. Attach the cuff to the sleeve. Then finish the raw seam allowance with an overlocker or serger. Repeat the same steps for the second cuff. As you can see, the top part of the dress is now finished. The only step left is attaching the lower part, the skirt. The skirt is made from two pieces, the front and the back. Make sure you don't mix them up, as they look very similar. I usually mark my pieces with a washable fabric pen or attach a small label so I can easily tell them apart. The skirt is gathered, so first, measure the front and back of the bodice with a measuring tape. This will tell you how much you need to gather each skirt piece. Remember to include the seam allowances in your measurement. For example, if the front bodice measures 55 centimeters, gather the front skirt piece to 57 centimeters because you need to add 1 centimeter of seam allowance on each side. Once both skirt pieces are gathered to the correct width, sew the front and back skirt pieces together at the side seams, then attach the skirt to the bodice. Here's a little tip. As you can see in the video, after gathering the skirt, I stitch a strip of clear stabilizing tape over the gathers. This helps keep the gathers evenly distributed and prevents them from shifting or the gathering stitches from breaking while I sew the skirt to the bodice. And that's it. Your baby doll dress is finished. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that it helped guide you through each step of the sewing process. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow me for more sewing tutorials, pattern inspiration, and new projects. You can find the sewing pattern for this baby doll dress in my Etsy shop. The link is in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Happy sewing!